Confident men still have fear. It's not like it goes away just because we're confident in what we say or what we do. It's important to note that it's not just in approaching women, but that too. Sometimes it's in how we handle the relationship or what we should do so that we keep her happy, keep her around, keep ourselves out of trouble, or keep the peace. Let me tell you that the only way to overcome fear is to change the story you're telling yourself and do it afraid. I'm going to show you how to do it. Let's get it. In this video, where I talk about pressure, up here, over my shoulder, I mentioned that pressure is a concept, something we have to determine in our minds that exists. Fear is much the same. We have to make a conscious decision that we are indeed afraid of an interaction, a circumstance, or an outcome. How you conceptualize fear is often more about you than the circumstances at hand. Think about this. If you want to apply for a job, but you don't get it, what are the tangible results? You don't get the job, you continue doing what you're doing, and you move forward. In our minds, it's much, much different than that. You think about what others think. You consider that the person who interviewed you may not think you're qualified, and you're kind of embarrassed by the idea. You might even believe yourself that you aren't qualified because you have seen and heard what others have said previously about the qualifications. You start conjuring up all kinds of ideas that say you shouldn't apply or try for an interview because of your perceived fear. Often, the fear isn't even real. The fear is a concept with no real consequences. It's a story you've created to repress the exposure to what you might think of as embarrassment or humiliation. Let's talk about how to control the narrative you tell yourself. My narrative. I applied for an internship with a record label back in the day, like way back in the day. Actually, I applied for a couple of them, but I only really won one of them. I talked to the woman who would become my manager if I got the gig, and I tried to get it before I traveled across the country, but it wouldn't work that way. She said, I can't guarantee you the job, but once we have another interview, I can tell you for sure. Fast forward in the story. I had to move first and do the interview later if this was going to work out. I knew my ability in this area, and I knew I was going to be a tough candidate to beat if there were others going for the same position, which later I found out there were. I made the move, did the interview, and got the job. Do you think I was afraid? Of course I was, but I did it anyway. But that's only half the story. I had already told myself it was a done deal. True, I had kind of a backup plan, but in my mind, to be real, there was no backup plan. This was the only option. I did the work, I was prepared, and I was confident. The only way to win in this situation was to do it afraid. You have to learn to do it afraid. So how do you do that? Change your narrative. You're ready for the position. You've already overcome the challenge. The woman doesn't know what she's missing because you're the right one for her. When you change your story, you believe your story, and then others fall in line. When you change the story you're telling yourself, you change the story you're telling the world. Others will follow. People believe you. Confidence is like air. People start to breathe confidence. Have you ever been around an amazing leader? I have, but let me give you an example. Coach K, formerly the head coach of Duke basketball, lives and breathes confidence. Go back and listen to General Colin Powell. That man literally breathed confidence. When you learn the true story about who you are and what you can become, when you share with others, it's infectious. If you want to approach someone but you're afraid, tell yourself who you really are and how you're actually helping her meet someone who's going to be supportive and make her life better. See how it sounds when you change the story? When you believe your story, it shows up as confidence. You overcome fear when you believe your story. The point is to tell others what you believe about yourself. When you believe that you're capable of whatever you set your mind to, others do as well. Your narrative becomes your reality, which brings me to my last point. Do it afraid. The only way to overcome fear is to believe the story you're telling yourself about being competent, capable, and deserving, and to do it afraid. We're all pressed, bruh. We're all nervous, unsure. I went from being full-time, gainfully employed, to moving to another city where I knew very few people. Guess what, y'all? I did it afraid. Then I went to a company where I wasn't W-2 anymore. I did it afraid. Now I'm in the C-suite of a small business, and I did that afraid. The connecting rod is that I told myself I was capable. I told myself fear couldn't stop me. I told myself I was deserving. Isn't that right, Sassy? In some cases, I told others as well. In some cases, I showed them. If there's ever an example of being afraid and doing it afraid, try being a YouTuber. You have to put yourself out there, being ready for ridicule and people's opinions from people who don't know you. If you have something to share, you do it anyway. My story is that there are men I've encountered that really could use support and insight on building their confidence and developing their charisma. The story is real, and I'm doing that thing, y'all. Still afraid sometimes, but I'm doing it anyway. Believe your story, and you conquer fear before it even has a chance to get a hold on you. When you know your story and believe your story, you know what you've been through and where you come from. You realize that tangible fear, like knowing not to touch a hot stove or jump out of an open window, is there to protect you. But fear that doesn't have realized consequences is there to keep you from being who you were designed to become. That kind of fear has no place in our lives. We were built to be powerful, strong, impactful people who change the game for ourselves and others. When you know your story and who you were really designed to be, you realize that your story, your charisma, and your confidence are all comprised to become your superpowers.